So I'm going to be talking about sort of updates to the office that is looking at UAP investigations for DoD and the American intelligence community. So if we look at sort of historical activity, I really put this in at the beginning, Project Sign, Grudge and Blue Book, just so that we're reminded that, you know, the idea of the government studying UAP or UFOs, they were, are now, you know, unidentified aerial or aerospace phenomena. It's not something that happened in 2004, which seems to be kind of a current narrative. It's, you know, been going back the best part of 8 decades. So Project Sign, Grudge and Blue Book took us 48 to 1969. Okay, then more recently, in the 1960s and the 1970s, we know from the recent book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon that there were actually Air Force Office of Special Investigation reports, effectively investigations into incidents like Maelstrom, the northern tier bases where you had UFOs flying in the vicinity of or directly over nuclear weapons installations and interfering with them, interfering with the capabilities of the missiles there. Okay, so, and then from there, you've got the very famous 1976 Tehran case that's been fairly well documented, and also the document that was sent to the Defense Intelligence Agency and also the White House from the American advisory team that was in Iran at the time. Okay, and then more recently, the 2004 Nimitz case. But the narrative has been very much, you know, recently from the government, it's very much placed as if, you know, somehow UFOs or UAP as if it all started from 2004. So I just wanted to remind everybody that goes back a long way. Okay, then we had the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program, which ran 2008 to 2010, and then ATIP, which was 2010 to 2017. Then the UAP Task Force, which took us to July 2022. And then the UAP Task Force and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, they provided what was called the preliminary assessment on unidentified aerial phenomena, which was a report into UAP in June 2021. In response to that, the DoD then set up what they called AIMSOC, which is the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. And some people think that this was really to head off Congress, who were becoming, you know, increasingly interested in the subject. And this was an effort by DoD to effectively say, look, you know, you don't have to legislate too much because we're actually on the UAP case, but we'll go into these in more detail and see how the case may be. Then in response to that, there was the Gillibrand Amendment to the FY22 National Defense Authorization Act. Okay, most of that was later signed into law in December, except the DoD did manage to head off one part of the amendment, which would have seen an advisory group made up of outside professionals with security clearances, including those from members of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, who I'm a member of. Then the FDAA was signed into law, and there was the establishment of the office, organizational structure and authorities to address unidentified aerial phenomena. Okay. Then we had hearings from the House Intelligence, Counterintelligence and Counterproliferation Subcommittee on unidentified aerial phenomena, which was in May 2022. Okay, they were fairly critical, or rather the performance of the DoD at that wasn't that good, and due to criticisms from Congress as well, the DoD then changed the name again of the office to the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, okay, in July 2022. And now another change, sort of signaling continued kind of dissatisfaction from Congress, was for the financial year 2023 Intelligence Authorization Act. This act is effectively built on the NDAA for 22, and it's put in more provisions, including changing the name once again to the office to the Unidentified Aerospace Undersea Phenomena Joint Program Office, which more accurately reflects what it does, and we'll go into a bit more detail. Okay, so the core kind of legislation which defines what the mission, the directives of this office are, really comes from the financial year 22 NDAA. So it's the establishment of the office itself, and it's talking about transmedium objects or devices, airborne objects not immediately identifiable, transmedium objects or devices, and submerged objects as well. And a key factor through this legislation and throughout kind of the current legislation as well is indicating where UAP would provide a threat to the national security of the United States, or where foreign governments might have achieved a breakthrough capability. Okay, so here it has the duties of the office, coordinating with other departments and agencies of the federal government, including NASA, Department of Homeland Security, and NOAA, and also the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy is quite an interesting one because they have separate clearances from DOD. They've got the Q clearances. Dr. Jack Valet, in his book last year, Trinity, Best Kept Secret, he goes into quite a lot of detail about that. Okay, so that's quite important. And coordinating with allies and partners of the United States is appropriate. So really there, you're looking at NATO, you're looking at the Five Eyes, you're looking at countries, very close American allies, traditionally like Brazil, Japan, South Korea. Okay, so that's fairly. Now, in terms of the Department of Energy, this was an email from Dr. Eric Davis, which was in my first paper. And he's talking to Jack Sarfati. So he's talking about propulsion physics projects, and he says actual research for UAP propulsion physics falls under the purview of the military service labs and the Department of Energy labs. Okay, and then he says your propulsion idea will have to stand up to scrutiny by the military service labs and DOE labs review boards and panels. So that's quite an interesting factor there. So DOE is a major player. Okay, then as part of the legislation, I'm not going to go like through every point blow by blow. You can look at the legislation for both the Defense Authorization Act and the Intelligence Authorization Act. You can look at those on the congressional website and download those and read them at your leisure. But basically, the main parts of it, which carry through from the NDAA to the Intelligence Authorization Act, are the same. All they've done is in the various sections, they change unidentified aerial phenomena, they change it to unidentified aerial undersea phenomena. Okay, that's the major change that they make. And then there's a few amendments, which we'll talk about. So they talk about science plan, collection analysis plan, fairly self-evident there. Okay, and then this is quite an interesting one that I like. This is the response to and field investigations of unidentified aerial phenomena. So they're talking about excuse me, having the relevant expertise available, and also that the secretary of the DOD, in addition with the director of national intelligence, that they have to ensure that they've got the right personnel, adequately trained, and also with with the right resources to effectively respond to UAP incidents. Now, this is quite interesting. Hang on, let me just go back. In 1988, a Libyan a Libyan Hind 24 was lost over Chad. The Americans wanted to have a look at that helicopter, so they actually went in on the ground and they flew it out. And so that could be conceivably the type of mission that they're talking about, kind of like a response to UAP, a downed UAP, for example. And these are the kind of units that would be involved. Army Special Operations Aviation Command, which comes under Special Operations Command, and also the Joint Special Operations Command, which is also under Special Operations Command, in terms of units that would actually go on the ground or water and and retrieve an object. But American Special Operations Command, is very big anyway. There's a lot of other mission capable units. So if, for example, something went down off Japan or in an allied country, like for example Thailand, you probably see a special operations unit closer to that location, actually taking on the job until maybe these guys arrive. Okay, so another interesting part was in the legislation was assessment of any health-related effects, and a key one here is the number of reported incidents of unidentified aerial phenomena associated with military nuclear assets, including strategic nuclear weapons and nuclear-powered ships and submarines. Okay, and then the legislation then goes on to to say that that they want this reported on, and to have consultations with the chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So this is Congress basically having heard stories about the UAP, reports of UAP around nukes, nuclear installations, and also nuclear weapon storage facilities and active ICBM bases. So this is Congress being concerned about that and having this in the legislation. So here they just gave an overview of exactly what they're talking about in terms of the unidentified aerial phenomena, which we looked at. Okay. And then this is a key area as well, instances in which data was not shared. This is a requirement where they want to know where elements of the intelligence community or DoD are not cooperating effectively with the office, the UAP office, to share information and to share intelligence. And this comes down to the problem of stovepiping, where traditionally you had different areas of DoD and the intelligence community that had information on UAP but didn't want to share it with each other. And it's fair to say that the UAP task force and also AIMSOG, UAP task force was severely under-resourced. AIMSOG didn't get off to much of a better start. It was 8 months, I think, until it had a director actually appointed. And both of them were reportedly stonewalled by other parts of DoD and by the intelligence community. So that data sharing is very important. Okay, here it gives the reporting requirements when the office has to report, and then it tells the type of intelligence they want to look at, so geospatial, signalance, human intelligence, and MASINT. Okay, then again, any threats to the national security of the United States, and anything that can be attributed to adversarial foreign governments. Okay. Here they're talking about authorization and appropriations. So it's for general intelligence and also for these purposes that they've outlined down here. Okay, and then it talks about semi-annual briefings. If you want to know exactly when all the reports are going to come out for your own use, then you can basically look at the legislation, and it will nail it all down for you. Okay. Now we go into the financial year 23 for the Intelligence Authorization Act. This is where it's building on the National Defense Authorization Act. Okay, so here they're talking about establishment of Unidentified Aerospace Undersea Phenomena Joint Program Office. They've changed it now from UAP to adding in undersea. The director is going to be appointed by the Secretary of Defense. That's the director of this office. And the deputy director is appointed by the Director of National Intelligence. Okay, so both report to the Secretary of Defense on all operational matters of the office. So at the end of the day, it's the DoD which is running it with input from the intelligence community. Okay, this is interesting here. It talks about the Geospatial Agency, which will lead all the efforts of intelligence with respect to unidentified aerospace undersea phenomena in terms of geospatial. Another interesting one is a core group, and it's saying in this amendment, not later than 180 days after the enactment of the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023, they will set up a core group from CIA, National Security Agency, DOE, NRO, Air Force, Space Force, Defense Intelligence Agency, and National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. I wouldn't read too much into it about the Navy not being mentioned there, because it actually talks about in the legislation, it actually talks about members of the UAPTF who came from naval intelligence actually being moved to the new office. So I wouldn't read too much into not seeing Navy there. Okay, and let's talk about annual reports again and reporting requirements. And then again, this is worth reiterating. It's talking about nukes again. So it wants to know about any incidents of these UAP with nukes. Now it's talking about reports from elements of the intelligence community. So Congress doesn't just want to see reporting from the office itself. It wants to each section, each part of the intelligence community is going to be required to provide a detailed report of how they've actually contributed and what's been shared. And if something hasn't been shared, then that gets reported as well. So again, this is really nailing down against the stovepiping, which has been so prevalent in the DoD and also in the intelligence community. They're basically trying to make everybody play together, be nice. Okay, again, talking about briefings. And then another requirement here, instances in which data was not shared. Okay, so for each briefing period, the director of the office has to give a report to Congress on instances where data was not shared with the office. Now, this is an interesting area in this legislation, this amendment. It's talking about identification of non-disclosure agreements. So it wants to have, the federal government is now required to provide a comprehensive search of all non-disclosure agreements as relate to UAP. Okay, so going back historically, and then to provide this information has to be provided to the office. This is a so-called whistleblower amendment. So it's protection from liability. So if you have historically worked in a black program and you have an NDA that says you're not even allowed to acknowledge the existence of the program, okay, you can speak behind closed doors to Congress, and the federal government can't penalize you for breaking your non-disclosure agreement. Okay. There's also the provision whereby the Inspector General the Inspector General will monitor that as well, and you have the right, if you are penalized by either your private contractor or by the federal government, you have a right to basically seek redress. You can't be penalized for breaking your NDA if it's related to UAP and you're talking to Congress. So prohibition from reprisals, basically. But the problem I see with that is the onus will be on you. If you want to come forward and speak, the onus is still going to be on you if you are penalized in the first place to actually, to start a legal case. Secondly, you're going to be out of pocket while that's happening. Thirdly, there's other ways that the employer could penalize you as well. If you're working for in the private sector, then you might not be advanced. You might be moved to some office in Alaska. I mean, they could penalize you in ways that would be very hard to prove in court. And the other issue as well is, given the nefarious activities that have happened with regards to the cover-up of UAP since 1947, is that potentially if you've been involved, if you're a party to nefarious acts or illegal acts, whether it's murder or some other illegal activity, or if you knew about, for example, a specific aerospace company had access to kind of exotic technology that the government had made available, and that therefore the company you're working for had an unfair competitive advantage, you're an accessory. And none of these provisions here talk about, all they talk about is you can't be reprisals against breaking your NDA. There's no kind of get out of jail free card. There's no redress for breaking the law. There's no get out of jail card, basically. So that's quite worrying. And also people might be worried for their lives as well. If you know that some very nefarious activities, for example, murder, have been carried out in order to ensure the cover-up of UAP and exotic technologies. If you've been party to that or you know about it, then you might be very reluctant to put yourself and your family in harm's way. So I see limitations with that. Okay, so in this amendment, the Comptroller General of the United States, he also has to go back looking at public records all the way back to 1947. Yeah, anything to do with UAP. So that's interesting. Anything from FOIA and anything from the National Archives. And also he gets to review, or she gets to review, the records and documents of the intelligence community as well. So that's an interesting one. Another area where they say, yeah, the Comptroller General is also to look at any intelligence community efforts to obfuscate, manipulate public opinion, hide or otherwise provide unclassified or classified misinformation about unidentified aerospace, undersea phenomena or related activities. So that's pretty breakthrough there. Okay, dissatisfaction. There was a report which was effectively like an annex to the Intelligence Authorization Act for 2023. So they're talking about the requirement to address unidentified aerospace undersea phenomena. And the Congress is saying, at a time when cross-domain transmedium threats to United States national security are expanding exponentially, the committee is disappointed with the slow pace of DoD-led efforts to establish the office to address those threats and to replace the former Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force as required. So the DoD and the intelligence community haven't gone far enough, and Congress feels that they've been dragging their feet. And now they're basically ratcheting it up, the legislation, to put the screws on DoD and the intelligence community. Also, dissatisfaction with the preliminary assessment. Here they're talking about sort of lack of effective information from the US Air Force, okay, in terms of standardizing reporting procedures. And then, yeah, it says, although USAF data collection has been limited historically, the US Air Force began a 6-month pilot program. So they're basically complaining there. They're saying, that the Congress will be dissatisfied with this, the fact that the Air Force, has not standardized its reporting procedures as fast as the Navy did. Now, all that's very strange because this guy, Major General Daniel L. Simpson, he was actually one of the, it says the UAPTF and the ODNI, when they produced this report in June of last year, this guy here, he was the National Intelligence Manager for Aviation. So he's a career, he's a 2-star general, right? And he's a career Air Force intelligence officer. So, this led, for example, Chris Mellon to write this piece for the debrief, saying, why is the Air Force AWOL on the UAP issue? Because the Air Force has been criticized for not providing enough information on UAP incidents. There's also been a focus of intrusions of UAP over restricted US airspace as opposed to airspace in general. And Congress has been unhappy that the UAP task force was looking at observations of UAP operating in special use airspace or training ranges, whereas they want the office looking at UAP. They want it to look at threats from outer Earth orbit, near Earth orbit, to the skies, the oceans, not just special use areas. Okay, there was another editorial by Chris Mellon. This is in relation to the hearings that the US government, that the Congress had. And I made a few notes. Yeah, it was in the hearings, the two officials, the Undersecretary for Defense and also the head of naval intelligence. They were talking a lot about adversarial platforms and about mitigating the threats posed by those platforms. But I think everybody knows that the Congress wasn't interested in the man-made platforms. Okay, whether it's Russia or China, they're interested in what is truly anomalous. And it kind of begs the question: isn't there any sort of institutional memory at the DoD? Because when they were asked things like, do you have any information on, the Malmstrom UFO incidents at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1966, the secretary was like, oh no, I don't. And they just didn't seem to. They just seemed, either disinterested or incompetent, or they'd just been briefed very badly. But it was they didn't seem to have any kind of knowledge that of UFO history. So they also they showed one video in that hearing. This was in May, of this year, and they didn't give any explanation as to what it was. And then in another video, they explained it away as a drone. But Congress isn't interested in that. Congress is interested in the truly anomalous, activities. The other big boo-boo that they made was the two officials. They were asked if they were aware of any other UAP programs between up to ATIP, and they completely missed out ORSAP. Okay, so between Blue Book and ATIP, they completely missed out ORSAP, even though it's been widely written about, and also the book Skinwalkers of the Pentagon. So that didn't make them look very good either. And still, there was a concentration in the hearings to Congress. There was still a concentration on the activity of UAP in training areas. Okay, so that's another area of dissatisfaction for Congress. Okay, so in June of 2021, this is another area where Congress wasn't happy. Okay, so they're still talking about UAP. This is the DoD. They're still talking about UAP in military test and training areas. Okay. And again, they're talking about UAP in special use airspace. And really, Congress, through the legislation, saying no, we want a much broader look at where UAP are operating. Okay, so RO was established in July 2022, and now it looks like the DoD, they're kind of trying to get on board, and they're saying airborne objects of interest in or near military installations, operating areas, training areas, special use airspace, and other areas of interest, including anomalous, unidentified space, airborne, submerged, and transmedium objects. So now they're starting to get it. Okay, Congress, this is what Congress wants us to do. So that brings me to the end of my presentation.